His assailant laughed at him for getting defeated so quickly. The beast had been completely defeated, and he ordered his men to search the entire kingdom. He wanted them to find the Book of Blood at any cost. Leng Mo told her he understood how important this was. What they had to do now was to figure out the intentions of the fourth prince and see who was supporting him from behind. The chief told him to calm down, since he hadn't at least taken their tribe's holy book. Without even one of the books, it was impossible to summon the evil lord. She told him as long as they were not discovered, they would be fine. Leng Mo professed that he would be heading back to his tribe right now to tell his chief. But before that, he would need to complete the arbitrator exam if he wanted to become a noble. This meant that the tribe would have to stay here for some time. He promised he would get them all out of there after the exam. The chief thanked him again, saying that she hoped he would save them soon. Leng Mo called out Silver, making the chief spit her dentures in fear. The tribe knew it as the Silver Devil and thought it to be hostile. Leng Mo told them to not be scared, saying that Silver was his familiar and that it wouldn't hurt them. He had summoned it to protect the dwarves while he was gone. The chief could not believe it. Leng Mo asked if she wanted to pet it, and she quickly refused. He told her they wouldn't have to worry about any attacks from monsters with Silver by their side. He would come back for them after the exam. He asked if there was a way out of there. She said there was, and told him to follow her. All of a sudden, Phoenix shouted at them to hold up. He asked Leng Mo to not waste the great Swordmaster-level monster and let him consume it instead. Leng Mo accepted his request, saying that these kinds of monsters were rare. Phoenix informed him that its core should also have a lot of fire elements for him. The group made their way back to the monster, and Leng Mo asked the dwarves to stay back. Phoenix slowly flew towards the it and began casting a spell. Energy from the monster started flowing towards him. He began to glow brightly. Slowly but surely, the monster was being consumed, and after a while, Phoenix had absorbed all of it. The absorption sent powerful shockwaves around him. Leng Mo noticed that he had evolved. Lying in front of them was a phoenix egg. Without a moment's notice, it started hatching. The shell broke and flames erupted out. The chief asked her tribesmen to back off so they didn't get burned. Leng Mo could not believe what he was seeing. The dwarves started praising Phoenix, impressed by its power. Phoenix flew towards Leng Mo and expressed how much energy he had just consumed. So much so that it had even given him an upgrade. He rested himself on Leng Mo's head and ordered him to move on now, but Leng Mo wouldn't take it. Annoyed, he told him to get off and asked him why he wasn't flying. Phoenix said that he had gained weight and that flying took too much energy. Back over in the Arbitrators Association in Skyway City, Bing Yu was begging the old man to save Leng Mo. He told him he wasn't dead and that he was inside the stomach of the monster. He wanted the old man to send troops to rescue him right now. The old man asked him to calm down, saying that they had sent people to investigate. But there seemed little hope to him since there was lava everywhere. He told him he should have been prepared for these kinds of situations since he had decided to enter the arbitrator exam. Bing Yu angrily retorted, saying he was not dead and that they were responsible for the monster. Suddenly, a familiar hand stopped him. Bing Yu turned around to see Principal Fairly. He asked the old man where his beloved apprentice was. The man was surprised to see him and inquired why he had paid them a visit. The principal gave him a stern look and ordered him to send everyone he had to rescue him. He told him that if he was to see even as much as a scratch on Leng Mo, then he was going to murder him. The old man appeared to be afraid of him and apologized. He told him that he had no idea Leng Mo was his apprentice. The association would be doomed if something were to happen to Leng Mo. Out of nowhere, the principal punched him, telling him to hurry up. He also wanted to know how a monster could get into the exam location. Suddenly, someone barged in to report to the man that they had found a missing candidate, and they were sure that it was Leng Mo. Bing Yu's eyes became teary on hearing this. Both Bing Yu and Firely rushed to see him, glad that he was still alive. Leng Mo entered the room and apologized for making them worry. He announced that he was safely back. Firely was not pleased to hear what the old man had to say. Apparently, Leng Mo had been disqualified from the exam because he had failed to reach the finish line. He gave the old man another scary look and he started apologizing. He told Firely he would assign him a retake of the exam. The principal asked him to repeat what he had just said. The old man got intimidated and begged him to take back his aura. He announced that Leng Mo had passed the second test and could now move on to the third. Leng Mo looked a little taken aback but thanked him anyways. Firely quickly changed his tone, saying he knew he was someone better than that. He added that he had not made him do this, and the man quickly agreed, saying he had obviously come up with the decision himself. Firely walked off with his students, and the man breathed a sigh of relief. Leng Mo thanked his master for his support, and Bing Yu was glad they had made it through safely. He asked Leng Mo what had happened inside the monster, and how he had managed to get out. Leng Mo told him how scary it had been. He had actually thought he was dying, but thankfully his practice of the high-density fire aura had paid off. He was contemplating telling Bing Yu about the dwarves, but decided against it for now. He began by saying that after being swallowed, nothing had really happened to him, so he had used the special tyrant broadsword technique that Master had taught him to get himself out. After he had climbed out of its body, he had found himself on a flat surface. Ares was glad his technique had paid off. He figured the two of them must be tired and told them to go back and rest. The next day, Lengmo met up with Sedila in the hall. He was really glad to see Lengmo still alive and kept hugging him. Lengmo was not having any of it and told him to get off. The other participants had noticed him and were amazed to see that he was still alive. One of them had seen him being swallowed by the monster, but it seemed like he had defeated it. Mumbling spread about the monster being a great swordmaster level and that he must have had a lot of courage in order to defeat it. All of them were hoping they wouldn't have to face him in the upcoming exams. Suddenly, someone asked them to be quiet. A man entered the hall and introduced himself as the examiner. He had heard about the previous day and was impressed by how many of them had passed. The kids this year didn't seem ordinary to him. He announced that the third exam would now begin and started to explain the rules. The first two exams were for endurance and willpower, but the third test was mainly mental strength. He pointed to the right, saying that it was the location of their exam. Each of them was supposed to pick a chair and get seated. There was a magical circle under the chair for strengthening the power of the illusion magic. When the test began, the magic circle would give out illusions. He asked them to not resist the illusion in any way or try to break it. The test was going to be held inside the illusion, and candidates would be required to solve the dilemmas shown to them. Whatever they would face inside, the illusion would be different for everyone. There was one thing for sure, though, that the illusion would be their deepest fear. He announced that if he saw someone struggling, he would break the illusion, but that would mean they would fail the test. Even if he was to save them, there was a possibility that their mind might no longer be intact. The worst-case scenario was that they might end up going insane. He asked how many of them still wanted to take the test. He was going to give them some time to think if they still wanted to drop out. The candidates started having second thoughts, but Lengmo confidently moved forward. The three friends seated themselves on the chairs. The examiner had noticed them. He noted that courage was a great quality to have, but bravery itself was not enough. He wanted to see if their mental power could withstand the real thing. A few more participants started making their way to the room, not keen on giving up. Some of them were already fed up with the exercises that the examiners had cooked up and were not willing to take it next year, while others boldly claimed that they were not afraid. The examiner was impressed that nobody had given up. Everyone was quickly seated and he declared that the third test of the exam was now starting. Lengmo noticed the spell being cast below him. He felt like he was being warped into another dimension. He started to feel dizzy and suddenly fell on a soft surface. He had no idea what had just happened and got up to look around. He looked at the furniture and noticed that he was in the dwarf tribe before it had been destroyed. He had no idea how he had ended up there. He was also wearing his old clothes. Just then, he remembered he had been attending the arbitrator exam and wondered if this was the illusion. The last time he had faced an illusion, he had not kept any memories from the real world. This time, all of his memories were kept and he didn't know what he was supposed to do now. He decided he would just walk around the village first. He had missed the place while he was gone. He opened the front door and noticed snow falling outside. Snow had never fallen in the dwarf village in his real memories. He noticed a pool of blood in front of him and turned around to see everyone slaughtered. At the same time, Bing Yu was on a magical staircase. He felt like he was starving and wondered if this was an illusion. He didn't know why he was feeling hungry in an illusion and wondered what he was even supposed to do. He had already been climbing up for half a day, yet he still couldn't see the end. He just wanted it to end so he could eat something. It seemed to him like he had never felt this hungry before. Every step he took seemed to increase his hunger. Suddenly, he noticed a beautiful fragrance coming from above. Someone else seemed to be working these stairs. It was Long, and he had a piece of meat in his hand. Bing Yu asked him to wait up so he too could eat the meat. Without wasting a moment, Lengmo started running away. Bing Yu was confused and yelled at him to wait up. He told him he was starving and wanted some of the meat. Lengmo kept speeding up. Bing Yu grew frustrated and kept telling him to stop. The real Bing Yu seemed to be drooling in his sleep. The examiner noticed his saliva dripping and wondered what was going on. All the candidates were supposed to be in a painful condition. He wondered if there was something wrong with the illusion, but the other candidates seemed to be doing just fine. He figured he would just pay attention to Lengmo then. All the while, Lengmo was in a state of despair. This was the day the tribe had been destroyed. He screamed at the invaders and remembered that Uncle Wernaduo was going to be killed. Just then, Uncle noticed him and told him to run. A voice came from behind, mocking him, and landed a heavy blow on his chest, knocking him out. The assailant made a remark on how he had made him chase after him for so long. Lengmo could not bear to see this anymore. The assailant spit on his body and insulted him. He noticed Lengmo and announced that they seemed to have missed one. He began insulting the dwarves again, but before he could finish, Lengmo had struck him with his sword. Another soldier called out to him, but he was already dead. He had no idea what was happening to his comrade's corpse and why the bodies were turning into lights and flying away. Another soldier noticed that they were all being absorbed by Leng Mo's sword. The soldier stumbled back in fear, calling him a demon, and began running away. Leng Mo lifted his uncle in his arms and told him that he was going to seek revenge. Tears were flowing down his eyes, and he wanted to ask everyone what the dwarves had ever done wrong. A few other soldiers spotted him and made their way towards him. The first soldier tried to warn everyone else about his sword, but the second brother wouldn't believe him. He asked him what he was afraid of and ordered everyone to stab Leng Mo. Leng Mo gently put his uncle down, asking him to rest for a bit. He was going to give him a proper burial after he had killed all the bandits. His face was full of wrath. He announced that nobody was leaving alive today. All of them would be sacrificed for his uncle. The soldier was surprised that a dwarf knew how to use aura. It was a strong aura to top it off, and before they could do anything, he had already charged at them. His flaming sword cut through them like butter, turning them into ashes. The whole lot disappeared into the thin air, and Leng Mo finally managed to calm down. Someone called out to him from behind, impressed with his skills. He had managed to kill all of his soldiers with just one slash. The voice asked him why he was helping the dwarves, even though he was a human. He told Leng Mo to drop his weapon, or else he would kill the old man who seemed to be important to the tribe. The old man was Leng Mo's grandpa. This made the bandit even more assured. He told him he had to drop his weapon if he wanted him alive. Leng Mo grew angry. Grandpa shouted at him, urging him not to listen. He just wanted Leng Mo to kill him without worrying about him. The bandit hit his head with his sword shaft, ordering him to shut up. Leng Mo was growing frustrated. The bandit told him to drop his weapon if he wanted him to stop. He warned him not to do anything suspicious since he was not afraid for killing, as that was what he did for a living. Leng Mo dared him to go ahead and touch him, and he would have his head torn off. The bandit didn't seem to back off and demanded him to be careful with his words. He didn't usually hurt his hostages, but if he were to get triggered by his words, then he might end up doing something crazy to his grandpa. Leng Mo yelled at him to stop and threw away his sword. He desperately asked the bandit to let him go now. The bandit finally accepted his request and told him to back away 50 steps away from him. Leng Mo told him he was asking for too much. The bandit sarcastically told him that he was really scared. He asked if he should poke a hole in his grandpa's face to calm both of them down. Leng Mo had no choice but to agree to his demands. The bandit praised him for being such a good boy, but claimed that he would need to be more cautious for a warrior like him. He placed his hand on the ground and cast a spell around Leng Mo, trapping him in a bundle of spikes. Leng Mo shouted at him, reminding him that they had a deal. The bandit confessed that he wouldn't be able to handle Leng Mo on his own. If he was to release Grandpa, and then Leng Mo got him, he would be dead. His earth magic was immensely powerful, and Leng Mo couldn't seem to move at all. Leng Mo promised he would spare him if he freed his grandpa. The bandit seemed like he was going to finally release him, but instead he proceeded to kill him, saying that he could have him back now. Leng Mo was enraged. The bandit insulted him for being so stupid. He asked him what he was going to do while being trapped inside his magic. Leng Mo began to scream with everything he had. The bandit asked him if he was trying to escape. He informed him that his earth magic could supposedly even trap a great sword master. Suddenly, the spikes began to break, leaving him shocked. His immense aura made the bandit even more intimidated, and he realized he had no choice but to run. Leng Mo mocked him, asking if he was running away. The bandit called him a beast and desperately tried to get out of there. It was to no avail, though, as Leng Mo furiously jumped towards him and landed a heavy blow, sending shockwaves through the land and disintegrating him. Tears were running down his eyes, as he realized he had miserably failed to save anyone. He wanted to know why this was happening with him. The tears wouldn't stop and only kept increasing. His uncle was gone. He'd been training so hard, but had still not been able to protect anyone. He helplessly clenched the snow, not knowing what to do anymore. A voice called out to him, telling him that this was his weakness. He looked up to see his grandpa standing in front of him. He told Leng Mo that water which was too pure had no fish. What this essentially meant was that demise awaited anyone who fell too deeply in love with something. Leng Mo was just happy to see his grandpa alive and didn't care about anything else. His grandpa corrected him, saying he was actually dead, and that it was all his fault. Leng Mo tried to deny it, but Grandpa reminded him that he had surrendered his weapon and asked him if he understood the consequences of his action. Leng Mo told him that he had said he would kill Grandpa if he didn't listen to him. His grandpa told him he had been foolish to surrender. He should not have believed that he could negotiate with the bandits. He asked him if he really thought they would keep their promise. If he had kept a weapon in his hand, then it would have at least deterred the bandit from acting on his threats, but instead, he chose to drop it. Leng Mo was lost for words and began questioning if he was really the one who had killed Grandpa. Grandpa told him he was a good kid, but he sometimes messed things up like this. Leng Mo tried to argue, saying that he couldn't just leave him in danger. His grandpa replied by saying that he didn't blame him for his death. He just couldn't bear to see him being so impatient. He stressed the fact that Lengmo needed to be patient no matter what happened. He needed to calm down and think his way out. He told him not to forget what those humans had done to them. He was going to seek revenge, but he was not to get blinded by hatred. He would only be able to become an arbitrator once he learned to control his emotions.